So we can't expect the clans to play by clan rules in combat? Again, sort of. Most of the time, they will try to fight honorably, but will adapt if necessary. The Falcons are rigid traditionalists, so Alina was an aberration to them. On Coventry and elsewhere, they have tended towards traditional tactics, but actually use a blend of old and new fighting styles that match the rules of engagement to the situation. When the Star League Defense Force left the Inner Sphere, they did not leave empty-handed. They brought with them all the tools necessary to recreate civilization far from the trials and tribulations of the squabbling great houses. Industrial tools, factory robots, and many thousands of tons of repair parts were needed. Additionally, battlemechs, tanks, aerospace fighters, VTOLs, and countless other weapons of war filled ship holds, and every bullet taken was one less bullet used against the innocents during the Succession Wars. On a computer hard drive on one of those ships, locked away from those malicious eyes, were plans for a battlemech that could rival any that had come before it. When unleashed onto its enemies, it caused the ground to rumble and filled the air with unyielding death. Sometimes. It is the bane of any who face it. It is the Kraken. The Clan Jade Falcon designers saw the Bane as an opportunity to create the ultimate fire support assault mech. This is partially due to the design's Star League roots, but also for the possibilities to use its 100-ton chassis as a stepping stone for a wide variety of other mech concepts and weapon loadout ideas. With 55.5 tons available for weapons, equipment, and ammunition, the possibilities are nearly endless, especially as the timeline moved forward and new technologies became available. First produced in 2827, the Bane would reign as the heaviest of the clan battlemechs until the Stone Rhino would match it in 2847. The first 100-ton Omni-Mech, the Direwolf, wouldn't roll off the assembly lines until 3010, so unlike the lighter second-line clan battlemechs, the Bane would remain highly sought after by Jade Falcon warriors and battlefield commanders well after the rise of the Omni-Mech. Constructed from a core of Type AXT Mark X steel, a Fusion 300XL engine, and standard forging C745 armor plate, it's clear that the goal for the base of this mech is to maximize structure hardpoints for weaponry. The 300XL is a compromise on that, but the weight savings is 9.5 tons, so it's hard to pass that up just for 4 additional critical locations. With the top speed of 54 kilometers per hour, the Bane isn't going to be winning any sprinting contests. However, it can lay down a light star's worth of fire instead. The communication system is a JNE integrated, and the targeting and tracking system is a Series 6 TTS, which are both in-house technologies produced within Clan Jade Falcon, and originally produced at the Tokasha Mechworks facility and later by Olivetti Weaponry on Sudaten. Due to its weight, the Bane tested the ability of the designers to create a chassis strong enough to hold up the mech and remain a steady platform for weaponry. This process involved creating new technologies and designs for arm baffles that would reduce recoil, reinforced connection points between sections of the mech to stand up to metal fatigue caused by movement and repeated weapons fire, and an experimental hip design which allowed for smoother and more flexible movement. Even the 19 tons of standard armor was added in a way to promote stability and lower the mech's center of gravity as much as possible. The original weapons configuration of the Bane was a boon for the manufacturers of AC-2 ammo and earplugs. Perhaps dentists too, once people started showing up needing to replace the fillings which had been shaken out of their skulls. Armed with 10 Ultra AC-2s, the Bane can reach out to 27 hexes to theoretically do up to 40 damage in a turn if all the dice, which of course there will be many, fall in your favor. If you're a little underwhelmed, you're not alone. While these are AC-2s and they are useful for occasionally crit seeking, the sandpaper effect they have isn't enough to intimidate most battlemechs. I have attempted to play with a standard version of the Bane quite a few times over the years, and it has never performed as well as I'd hoped. For almost 2,000 battle value, a 100-ton mech needs to be hitting hard. The one edge that the Bane has is exploiting that through armor critical rule. Rolling for that many hits, you're going to see it much more often. Of course, we can't forget about the 4 machine guns in the right torso. They could really make the difference. At least it's something, right? It's not unfair to point out that the Bane's original weapons configuration was lacking beyond a purely defensive role or as an anti-air mech. Thankfully, in 3053, a second variant was introduced, which sought to give the mech a little bit more stopping power. Pulling the AC-2s and replacing them with 4 Ultra AC-10s, the possible damage at up to 18 hexes was increased to 80. Now we're cooking with kerosene. With 14 tons of ammunition, the Bane 2 can pummel targets for a considerable amount of time before running low on ammunition. It retains the 4 machine guns and a half ton of machine gun ammo, which is fine. Now with only 10 double heat sinks, double firing those Ultra AC-10s does create a slight heat issue, but 4 over isn't the end of the world, and I think the variant 2 of the Bane is much more intimidating and powerful than the original. Even single firing 40 damage in chunks of 10 is much more concerning than 2 at a time. Just 1 year later, at 3054, a third variant was released which embraced the fire support role of the mech by putting 8 LRM-15s on it along with 16 tons of ammunition. If a target gets close, a Streak SRM-4 one-shot is an additional help. Using my public school math education, I was able to sort out that's 120 missiles fired per turn. My 9-year-old has confirmed this, but he does math in his head like he thinks he's better than me. Now where was I? Ah yes, the 40 heat generated by those missiles is almost entirely wiped out by the 19 double heat sinks, so you can just let the missiles fly. If this Bane is teamed up with some lights carrying narc beacons, the possible damage is completely devastating for even the heaviest of battlemechs. Of course, all this comes at the cost of being almost 500 more battle value than the version 1 or 2. By 3066, the Banes were showing their age, and it was clear that the mech was in dire need of upgrades and retrofitting to take advantage of new technologies. At this point, there were half a dozen other 100-ton clan mechs in existence, and most of them were considered far more dangerous than the Bane. Even the Jade Falcons, who loved the design, were being drawn toward mechs like the Turkina, which were much more flexible and deadly at all ranges. The Bane's 4th official variant would be far more than just a swap out of weapon systems. It completely reworked the mech from internal components like actuators, armor placement, mechanical and electrical systems. The final result was a battlemech that shared the name, but only vaguely resembled the original design. The Bane 4's role wouldn't be as a long-range fire support mech, but as a nasty close-range brawler. Keeping with the tradition of autocannons, the Bane 4 carries 2 Ultra Auto 20 autocannons, along with 3 tons of ammunition for each of them. Backing up the autocannons are a trio of advanced tactical missile 6 launchers, along with 4 tons of ammunition. Finally, to help the mech survive unexpectedly long battles, an ER large laser was installed in the right torso. The end result was a 100-ton battlemech that is absolutely devastating at close range. Just for fun, let's figure out what the top possible damage would be if every weapon was fired and hit. 2 Ultra AC-20s would be 80 damage, the ER large lasers another 10, then the high explosive ATM rounds are 3 × 6 × 3, which is 54 damage, adding them up using the power of MS calculator and chocolate almonds, and that's a total of 144 damage. For comparison, the standard Inner Sphere Phoenix Hawk has 136 total armor points across the whole battlemech. Now you might be asking, MechFrog, what's the possible drawback here? And I'd say, calm down, we're getting there. The most substantial concern from the Bane 4 is the mech's slow speed. Getting close enough to bring those Ultra AC-20s into play can be difficult if your opponent is smart enough to keep their distance. However, the ATM long-range missiles and ER large laser are still going to do the work along the way, so the mech cannot be entirely contained through distance. Eventually, you're going to have to work through that 19 tons of armor. The other drawback is ammunition. You have 15 shots per Ultra AC-20. If you're a little too trigger happy with them when the mech is in the thick of it, the ammunition can go quickly. Overall, I do like the Bane 4, though the art does not click with me at all. I know there are fans of it out there, so I'm not going to trash talk it, it's just not for me. I'll stick with the absurdly fun original or the bulkier CGL redesign. Pretty or not, the Bane 4 was so successful that it replaced many of the previous variants and saw extensive use against the Lyrans along the Falcon occupation zone border. In 3105, the Bane received a Dark Age refit, which is a partial nod to the original loadout with 4 rotary AC-2s installed into the right and left arms. For the uninitiated, the rotary autocannons can fire up to 6 times per turn with an increasing likelihood of jamming. A single RAC-2 could do up to 12 damage in a turn, which means the 4 that the Bane 5 carries could do up to 48 damage if the Mechwarrior is lucky. In addition to the RAC-2s are a pair of LRM-10s located in the left and right torsos, an ER large laser in the right torso, and an ECM suite in the head. To me, it feels a lot like this is the fire support mech that the original designers of the Bane intended. Between the autocannons, the LRMs, and the ER large laser, the Bane 5 can put a significant amount of fire downfield. While there are 6 tons of ammunition protected by Case 2 on those RAC-2s, If you're firing 6 times per turn per gun, or even slightly less, you're going to be burning through that ammo quickly. So show some ammo discipline, soldier. The Bane 6, first produced in 3110, goes a slightly different route by cramming in 10 battlemech AC2s, 4 ER medium lasers, an ECM suite, and a targeting computer. While the battlemech AC2s buy some of the weight from the original Ultra AC2s, you don't get that double shot capability. The ER medium lasers and the targeting computer are nice, but the amount of damage from the mech is limited by the fact that the autocannons just aren't worth the cost in tonnage. 10 battlemech AC2s are 35 tons of weight, not counting ammunition, and only doing up to 20 damage per turn. A clan ERPPC weighs 6 tons and does 15 damage. There's really no justifying this variant unless you were sitting on a stockpile of Banes without weapons and had a warehouse full of battlemech AC2s and no other weaponry. This unfortunate variant is rated a 1 salamander on the amphibian scale that I just made up. The 7th official variant of the Bane is the closest we have to an ill clan variant. Thankfully, there are no XXL shenanigans, and I cannot believe we're going to get through a video without having to say medium or large heavy laser. Crap, never mind. The Bane 7's 2 primary weapons are Hyper Assault Gauss Rifle 40s, which have a great range of up to 24 hexes and pack a wallop. That's a possible 80 damage. Remember, you're taking a roll on the cluster hits table first and applying the damage in groups of 5, so it's a lot like the LBX class of autocannons. Still, that's quite a bit of potential damage. Added to that are 4 ER medium lasers to keep the riffraff at bay, and a single large pulse laser in the right torso for some added punch and accuracy should a light run too close. The Hag 40s are supplied with 12 tons of ammunition, which adds up to 18 shots per rifle, not too shabby. The 14 double heat sinks are adequate for regular use, but heat will become an issue if that mech is forced to fire everything. While the Bane 7 is our last official variant, there is a curious experimental variant of the Bane known as the Kraken XR. Built as a test bed by Olivetti Weaponry on Sudeten for various cutting-edge technologies, it's clear that the extremely expensive refit of the chassis was never intended for widespread production. For the first time, the Bane was constructed with endo-steel framework, which ate up valuable critical locations but purchased extra weight for other options. In addition, the armor was swapped out for laser reflective armor to reduce the damage caused by energy weaponry. Oh, but that's not all. The same laser heatsink technology, which was first tested with the Night Gyre, was also implemented into the Kraken XR's 16 double heatsinks. The mech is armed with 4 rotary AC2s, which, as we discussed earlier, can produce a staggering amount of fire, if not so much damage. Backed up by 2 Streak LRM-10s and an ER large laser. All of the ammo is protected with Case 2, which prevents a single ammo explosion from destroying more than the section when the ammo is carried. Now, it is an interesting design, but pretty obvious that it was never intended for deployment, as there was only a single ton of AC2 ammunition in each arm's twin rotary AC2s. Going full bore, that would result in less than a minute of sustained fire before the ammo bins ran dry. Now, before we wrap this up, my vanity shows no bounds, so I came up with my own fire support variant of the Bane. It's stock except for an extra half ton of armor, pushing it up to 19.5 tons. The primary weaponry of the Bane MF consists of 4 advanced tactical missile 12 launchers, split between the left and right arms. For mid and short range fighting, the 4 medium pulse lasers are split between the left and right torsos and are aided by a targeting computer in the center torso. The ATMs are fed with 10 tons of ammunition, split mostly between extended range and high explosive, with 2 tons reserved for standard munitions. The heat generation is fine so long as you don't overdo it with the alpha striking at close range. Ideally, any short-range engagement would be short anyway due to the -3 to hit rolls for the pulse lasers and the high explosive ATM munitions. For those who haven't done that math yet on the ATM launchers, that's 12 times 4 times 3, or 144 possible damage. Even though it's just 48 possible damage using the extended range ammunition, remember that the whole time it would be lumbering across the battlefield, making a nuisance of itself to anyone who got close enough to hit with the standard or high explosive munitions. You can't ignore it, you have to try to take it down through that 19.5 tons of armor. All the while, the other opposing mechs on the field are doing their business. Now, we did run the Bane MF through Mega Mech twice just to see what would happen. The first time against a single Atlas D, which was like watching a professional MMA fighter take on a toddler. The Atlas D evaporated under the ATM fire and eventually took a few too many to the head, and the Mechwarrior was killed. The second match was a 10,000 point fight between the Jade Falcons and House Steiner forces. The Bane fared well, launching ATMs as support of the lighter mechs ahead of it. However, after obliterating a Zeus with a couple of rounds of high-explosive short-range fire, the Bane's Mechwarrior was knocked unconscious by incoming fire. The Jade Falcons did end up winning the battle, but only by the skin of their teeth in a 1v1 fight between a Crusader and a Cauldronborn. That's just how it goes in tabletop BattleTech. So why do we love the Bane? Besides having one of the wackiest original art concepts from the 3055 technical readout, it's one of those mechs that can be a tremendous pain in the butt for an opponent on the tabletop. Even in the less than optimized variants, the ability to pelt a mech with lots and lots of AC rounds can be tremendously fun. The Bane ended up being overshadowed by 100-ton mechs like the Stone Rhino and Direwolf, but I still think there's value there, especially with some of the newer variants that use the available tonnage to greater effect. The Bane is a beast of a mech, and what's not to love about that? Thanks as always for coming by today for the BattleTech shenanigans. If you hit all the buttons to let YouTube know it's worth sharing with others, I would appreciate it. Going the extra step and becoming a channel member provides a link to our Discord where we hang out, talk mechs, and generally avoid working. Membership also directly aids the channel and makes all of this possible. Thank you so much. Now take care and go make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.